Hello, my name is Rebecca. My group members are Michaelin, Vincent, and Rowan. We are in first period AP Euro, and our explorative question is, why did NATO continue to exist after the Cold War ended? In this video, we will answer that question. NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, was founded in 1949. The original founding members included the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, France, Italy, the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, Denmark, Iceland, and Portugal. Later in the Cold War, the lines would expand to include Greece, Turkey, West Germany, and Spain. NATO was founded primarily as a mutual defense organization, and members are required to provide assistance to any other member if that member is attacked by a non-NATO country. In essence, if any country part of the alliance is attacked, every other country in the alliance treats that as an attack on themselves as well. NATO was created primarily to counter the military advantage that the Soviet Union held on the European continent. Following the end of the Second World War, the Soviet Union occupied and eventually installed pro-Soviet communist governments in the countries of Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. The Soviet Army would remain in these states up until the end of the Cold War and the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact alliance. Given this, a similar agreement between the United States and the countries of Western Europe was needed to counteract the military advantage that the Soviets had over the West in the early Cold War. NATO would continue as a primarily anti-Soviet alliance throughout the rest of the Cold War. Following the admission of West Germany into the alliance in 1955, the Soviets would create the Warsaw Pact, a defensive alliance similar to NATO, containing the Soviet Union and all of its Eastern European satellite states. Although the Soviets already militarily dominated all of the members of this Warsaw Pact prior to its creation, the pact created a formal alliance between the states and solidified Soviet domination of Eastern Europe. By 1989, the threat of the Warsaw Pact and Soviet military presence began to diminish as popular revolutions began to overthrow the Warsaw Pact communist governments. The Soviets, under Mikhail Gorbachev, refused to intervene in these popular revolutions in contrast to their previous interventions in Hungary in 1956 and in Czechoslovakia in 1968, respectively. This opened the door for revolutions to spread throughout Eastern Europe and eventually to the Soviet Union itself, when it was officially dissolved in 1991. By 1991, the Warsaw Pact would be officially disbanded, leaving NATO as the remaining major military alliance on the European continent. Given the context of the creation and existence of the NATO alliance during the Cold War that we have outlined and the evidence we have collected, we are prepared to claim that, despite the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization continued to exist primarily to maintain peace in Europe and regions surrounding Europe, to provide humanitarian aid, and to counter the continuing threat of Russia.
The first major reason for NATO's continued existence after the end of the Cold War was the need to maintain peace in Europe. As Robert B. McCullough wrote in an article published in the University of Cambridge Journal, International Organization, since 1992, NATO has become very involved in planning for peacekeeping activities, which of necessity will involve a closer involvement with other international organizations and institutions than currently exists. NATO has also participated in carrying out UN mandates with respect to air and sea embargoes against the former Yugoslavia, as well as military actions against Serb forces. NATO's intervention into the former Yugoslavia and the wars that resulted from the breakup of Yugoslavia showed that the alliance was still useful for maintaining peace in the post-Cold War era. In particular, the NATO interventions into the Bosnian and Kosovo conflicts showed that the alliance was prepared to intervene in conflicts that threatened peace in Eastern Europe. In both of these cases, NATO intervention was helpful in ending the conflict quicker. The interventions in the former Yugoslavia are not the only actions that NATO has taken since the end of the Cold War. In a journal article in the Political Science Quarterly published by the Academy of Political Science, John S. Duffield writes, NATO is increasingly seen as having a significant role to play in containing and controlling militarized conflicts in Central and Eastern Europe, and at a deeper level, it works to prevent such conflicts from arising at all, by actively promoting stability within the former Soviet bloc. In the statement, Duffield foreshadows the expansion of NATO alliance into former Soviet bloc countries beginning with Poland, Hungary, and Czechia joining the alliance in 1999. By allowing former Warsaw Pact and communist countries to join NATO, NATO in turn showed their commitment to maintaining peace in the Eastern European countries that joined the alliance. Expanding the alliance also took pressure off of Central European countries, mainly Germany, who no longer had to be the first line of defense on NATO's eastern flank in the event of an invasion from the east. Another example of NATO's commitment to European peace was noted in an article published by the Brookings Institute titled "NATO's Purpose After the Cold War." After the Soviet demise, the alliance embarked on ambitious projects in seemingly new directions, adopting a radically altered strategic concept that emphasized dialogue, cooperation, and crisis management over collective defense. In 1991, embracing the East through its Partnership for Peace initiative in 1994, moving to end the war in Bosnia in 1995, solidifying its European pillar in 1996, and enlarging its membership in 1999. NATO's Partnership for Peace initiative allowed NATO to begin the process of integrating with the new democratic states in Eastern Europe, and showed that NATO was seeking to engage with them peacefully, in contrast to the hostilities that existed between NATO and the countries of Eastern Europe throughout the Cold War. By 1999, NATO was ready to begin the process of admitting former Warsaw Pact members, and thus solidifying the peace between NATO and Eastern Europe. The admission of former Warsaw Pact members also sent a message to the rest of Europe that peace between East and West might be achievable.
In addition to maintaining peace in Europe, NATO also continues to exist for humanitarian purposes. In 1994, NATO launched the Participation for Peace initiative, which was meant to build a strong relationship between NATO and countries in the former Soviet bloc. Participation in the Partnership for Peace requires 6 areas of cooperation. In John Borowski's journal article, Partnership for Peace and Beyond, which was published by Oxford University, the 4th area of cooperation is described as, quote, developing cooperative military relations with the NATO for the purpose of joint planning, training, and exercises in order to strengthen the ability to undertake missions in peacekeeping, search and rescue, humanitarian operations, and other such areas as might subsequently be agreed. The Partnership for Peace highlights NATO's intention to participate in humanitarian issues. Moritz Jacom's article, NATO's Growing Humanitarian Role, which was published in the NATO Review in 2006, gives examples of this intention in action. One of the examples is NATO's involvement in the relief efforts after an earthquake in Pakistan in 2005. It states that, quote, NATO's contribution to the Pakistan relief effort was substantial. Indeed, if the many bilateral contributions of NATO's allies, and especially that of the U.S. military, are added to the NATO operation, the overall Allied effort was critical to the wider relief operation and helped save many lives, end quote. The other operations included NATO's involvement in relief operations after Hurricane Katrina. Despite not being created for humanitarian purposes, NATO has taken a larger role in relief operations since the end of the Cold War and therefore continues to exist partially for humanitarian purposes. Despite the end of the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia continues to pose a threat to Europe. NATO has continued to exist and expand partially to counter this threat. Between 1994 and 2000, Russia waged 2 wars against Chechnya. In 1994, there was a movement in Chechnya for independence, which led to Russia's invasion in December of that year. While Russia was initially successful, Chechen rebels were able to retake the capital Grozny in 1996. The peace agreement that resulted in 1997 made Chechnya a de facto independent state that was officially still part of Russia. In 1999, Russia invaded Chechnya again. Russia successfully gained control of Chechnya in 2000. This video shows the destruction in Grozny. Russia has also waged other wars and invasions since the end of the Cold War. This video shows all of them up until 2008. As seen by these events, Russia continues to pose a serious threat to Europe and its surrounding regions. NATO continues to exist and expand in order to counter this threat.
In conclusion, NATO's continued existence even after the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact, NATO's primary enemies during the World War, NATO has persisted due to the need to maintain peace in Europe, provide humanitarian aid, and counter the continued threat of Russia to NATO and Europe as a whole. The threat of Russia to peace in Europe has increased dramatically in the months following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. This invasion, the largest invasion on the European continent since World War II, has led many countries in Europe to reconsider their security situation and defense. Neutral countries during the Cold War, Sweden and Finland, are now turning to the NATO alliance as a solution to their security problems in the face of resurgent Russian aggression. In the past month, both Sweden and Finland have formally applied to join NATO and are now in negotiations with other NATO members to confirm their admission into the alliance. This video, taken during a press conference with Finland's president, shows his thoughts on why he sees Russian threats as a direct result of why he believes Finland needs to join NATO.
the situation changed. So far, even Russia has said that having militarily non-aligned Finland and Sweden, that will stabilize Baltic Sea. That's what they have been talking. But then, in the end of last year, they stated that Finland and Sweden can't join NATO. They demanded that NATO doesn't take new members. Actually, they changed their own picture by that, because we have, with Sweden, been non-aligned militarily from our own will. But by stating that, Russia actually expressed that you don't have your own will here. And that is a huge change. That made us think. And what happened in 24th February, which continues the huge warfare Russia is having in Ukraine, surely that changed also the picture. They are ready to attack a neighboring country. If that would be the case that we join, well, my response would be that you caused this. Look at the mirror.
Given that the threat of Russia is the primary reason for Sweden and Finland's joining of NATO, NATO's existence in modern Europe is as important as it has ever been and is likely to persist for many more years to come. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed. Oh, and of course, if you would like to check out more videos from this channel, click up here or up here. Thank you for tuning in.